Have you ever started a project that you thought was just going to be an experiment, only to find as it went along you got sucked deeper and deeper into the details? That's basically what happened here.
Alright, that's pretty hideous.
We had a tree go down near our house last winter. I went out the next day and I cut a couple of these branching sections because I had an idea for a sculpture that I wanted to try. The tree had been dead for a while, and as I started to take the bark off, I realized that the wood was not in as good a shape as I thought, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue. I wanted to at least try out the idea, so I thought I'd take the smaller piece of wood and I'd start on it, and it might end up just being a mock-up. But as you'll see, as I kept working on it, I got more and more invested in this piece and making it work. The first step was to remove all the bark using a draw knife and to get it all down to clean wood. I only kept a fraction of the footage, but this part actually takes a really long time. I tried to retain the shape of the piece of wood, so I'm moving kind of carefully as well. You can see here the piece is going to stand on a series of rocks, and the wood will have to be scribed to fit onto the rounded stones. Now, to judge by the channel so far, you'd think that all I do is scribe things to stones, but I actually do a lot of other things as well, and those will be coming out in future videos. I'm drilling a series of holes into the end of the piece so that I can create a rounded hollow to fit over top of the stone. So that's helped me rough out some of the central part. I think this is from a locust tree. I forgot to take a very careful look at the tree until later, and by then it was all hauled away. But the wood is really hard. Here you can see I'm getting that first scribe roughed in, and I've just propped up a little temporary third leg there to keep it at the angle that I want. I have another little branch that I'm going to add as a third leg. I think I'm going to add it coming out of this knot here. In order for this to be stable, I'm going to need to flatten the bottom of this round stone here. Because my studio is in my house, I had to go find somewhere outside where I could use the angle grinder and make a bunch of rock dust. So now I got this nice and flat. It should make a good stable base. I wanted to add another element here, and I also wanted to cover this top cut off piece of the branch. I decided to make a cap out of copper sheet metal. This copper that I'm using is actually a plate from a printmaking process called intaglio. I was given a bunch of these copper plates by someone who I actually don't really know, but they were obviously a printmaker and they were getting rid of a bunch of their old plates. I knew I could find a use for this copper. I'm just making a quick paper template that I traced from the top of the piece of wood. Then I can trace that onto the metal and cut it out. I don't really have much set up to do metalworking at home, but I'm going to attempt to solder these pieces together. Now, I have done some soldering before, but I'm not especially good at it, and I'm also using a soldering set that's intended for plumbing, so the soldering wire is really thick, and I think it's not going to be the best for this application, but we'll see if we can make it work. Let's just fire up the old torch. I apologize in advance to anyone who's actually good at this. So I'm heating up the metal here first, and I already have the flux placed on the joint. I know that you want to heat the area that you want the solder to flow into. So I'm heating from underneath and then just touching the solder to the top so that it'll be sucked down into that joint.
Alright, that's pretty hideous.
Hot. Very ugly from this side, but I'm gonna just grind that off, and I think it should be okay. Now I had the hardest time getting this second solder joint to work. So after a few tries at home, I ended up taking it to a friend's shop, and I finished it up there. I also cleaned it up on his grinder while I was at it. I'm going to be putting this onto here. Now I want this copper cap to sit flush with the piece of wood, so I'm just marking it out, and then I'll begin cutting in a rabbet. Like a lot of these processes, this is pretty simple, but just kind of time consuming. To hold it in place, I'm drilling holes in the cap, and then I'll add some small tacks. First fail. Did I mention that this wood is really hard? I had to drill a pilot hole for the nail, but then drilled it too deep. Second fail. Time for a coffee break. Don't go too deep on this one. Third time's the charm. I guess the old saying holds true. And with the cap in place, I'm getting close to finished. Or at least that's what I thought. So this thing is almost finished, I thought. But I decided I really don't like this element here. I actually never really liked it. So I've got this. I'm going to replace this one. And then I think I'm also going to put a piece in this other. So I'm going to make it a four-legged thing. So this is basically the same process as before. Because I'm making the legs from a thicker piece this time, the tenon has to be stepped back to fit into that small hole. And then I'll scribe the top of it so that it fits up tight against the trunk and looks like it's one piece. You can see this is already looking much better, but I'm still not happy with it. I've been playing around with it some, and I realized that this, as it was leaning forward, was going to cut these two arms way too short. So I'm actually going to move it back onto this stone and just adjust the scribe. It's actually not that far off at a different place on this rounded stone. And then these two are going to be cut to fit this one here. So I have my work cut out for me. I'm now adjusting all the scribes again, even the ones I already had fit. I'm building this little bracket off of my workbench because I'm essentially going to need to suspend the piece above the stones while I scribe the two new legs against them. It's a little bit hard to explain, but it'll make more sense in a minute when I show it. Now I've got it positioned just about where I want it on the first stone. I'm using a block under the first stone so that I know exactly how far up from the other one to measure to do my scribe. Now that I'm seeing it in place though, I want this other leg to curve down like this. So that means I'm going to have to redo the scribe at the top of the leg. I'm scribing here with a pencil held against a piece of stick and trying to keep it as upright as possible. If this seems imprecise, it is. But I'm basically just marking the angle here, and I'll cut it down undersized and refine it as I get closer. Now that the rough angles are looking correct, I can add some curves and begin to refine it. I didn't like how chunky these legs looked, so I'm going to taper them down and have them flare out at the bottom where they meet the stone. Because the pieces are so small, there's really no better way to do it than to just go at it with a knife. Now the legs are starting to take shape and they are looking a lot better. You can also see I have this stone set up on an equal height block. I used a series of different size blocks as I was refining the scribe and moving the piece slowly upward. Now I'm doing the same thing for the fourth leg. If you've gotten this far in the video, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for coming along on this journey with me. And I hope you're enjoying seeing some of the process behind making this type of sculpture. If you are enjoying it and would like to see more of this kind of content, now would be a great time to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to me. Alright, so with all the legs scribed and fitted to the stone, I'm now marking their location with blue tape so that I can find it again when I go to put it back together. I've mixed up some 2-part epoxy that I'm going to use to fix these legs permanently in place. Normally I would just use wood glue for a joint like this, but in this case, since it was a natural knot hole that had kind of rotted out on the inside, I'm using the epoxy to coat the whole interior of that, as well as to fix this in place. And I'll just use regular wood glue on the second one. Now I'm just lining it back up to make sure that all the angles are correct. All this glue is dried, so now I'm going to clean up and reshape how these fit. Now that the legs are permanently in place, I can clean up and shape where the leg meets the main trunk. I was considering for a while how I wanted to treat the surface of this piece. I knew that I didn't want a shiny finish that would sit on top, but I also didn't want to leave it completely unfinished. What I ended up doing is applying a coat of tung oil to the whole thing, and now I'm going back and I'm selectively scraping away at the surface till it's almost back to raw wood. This gives the surface a kind of weathered look, and it also creates a subtle light and dark shift from the top of the piece to the bottom. This looks like a Ninja Turtle. So the last step is to drill a hole so that I can place a dowel that goes between the stone and each leg. This will allow me to line up the piece correctly each time and make sure that it can't be bumped out of position. I'm starting with a 1/4 inch bit, and then I'm moving up to the 5/16. This particular stone is granite, so I'm having to go slowly and add water so that the bit doesn't overheat. I'm starting with the holes in the rocks because that's where the drill bit's most likely to wander. Then I'll transfer the mark to the bottom of the legs and drill that second. Now it's time to put the pegs in and make sure everything lines up. I did have to go back and forth a few times and adjust these before I finally got everything to line up correctly. But in the end, I was really happy with the result.